but we seem to worship guns instead of seeing their deadly power and influence over us. It's like they have some sort of Svengali control over everyone, and we're hypnotized. Yeah, I've been hypnotized by my guns.
Where gun culture meets the gospel. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 52, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. Welcome to 2017. I hope you enjoyed the last two episodes. Episode 50 and 51 were a look back at the fun that we had in 2016. I hoped it'd be sort of a vacation. It was for the contributors, but it really wasn't for me. I'd hoped to put together, I'd kind of envisioned a best of show, and I could actually take some time off, but it ended up being more work than usual. Just a lot of editing and re-editing and reformatting. Anyway, it turned out good. It was a lot of fun looking back at all of the shenanigans, all the fun stuff that we did last year. And it was fun to put it all together. I sure hope you enjoyed it. Before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Thank you to Bob Cook and Cook's Holsters for sponsoring the podcast again this year. I've been using Cook's Holsters for everyday carry and competition for years, and I'm proud to be a distributor of their products and proud to have Cook's Holsters as a sponsor of the podcast for a second season. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST, that's all one word, ARMEDPODCAST, to save 10% off your order. I'd also like to welcome some new sponsors for 2017. U.S. Reloading Supply is in Venice, Florida. Check them out for all your reloading needs. They have excellent customer service, fast shipping, and a promise to match or beat any other retailer's price, including shipping. Visit usreloadingsupply.com and use the promo code Lutheran2017 for a 10% discount off your order. And last but not least, if you like AK pattern rifles, and who doesn't, to be honest, check out Arizona-based Lee Armory. Lee Armory takes the reliable AK and adds a whole new level of quality. Check them out at Copper Custom, Classic Firearms, Aim Surplus, or Elite Ordnance, or you can visit them at leearmory.us. When we come back, it's back to business. We've got a full slate of Armed Lutheran goodness coming up. Tips from Aaron, tips from Mia, tips from Sergeant Bill, and an extra strength helping of Clinging to God and Guns with Pastor Bennett. It's Season 2 of Armed Lutheran Radio, coming up right after this.
Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. By now you've all heard what happened at the Fort Lauderdale International Airport on Friday. A lone gunman, a Latino American, a former member of the National Guard who served a combat tour in Iraq, traveling from Alaska to Florida with a firearm in his checked baggage. And at the baggage claim in Terminal 2, he went to the restroom, retrieved his loaded gun, and then went back to baggage claim and started shooting. At the time of this recording, we know his name. We know he had a history of mental issues. We don't know for certain a whole lot else. We do know that 5 people were shot and killed and 6 others were wounded. Now, we're going to be learning a lot in the coming days. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of unconfirmed news that I'm not going to repeat here. I'm not going to speculate on motivations or ties to terrorism or anything like that. Not yet. I've got some suspicions, but they could just as easily be wrong, so I'm going to reserve judgment until I've got more info. The media, though, as usual, is not being quite so circumspect. CNN has already published a doctored photo of the shooter. The New York Daily News and other national media outlets are already on that worn-out war path to blame guns. Anti-gun ghoul Shannon Watts has used the phrase, a good guy with a gun, in describing this man, and the astounding ignorance of so many Americans has really been on full display if you watched anything on social media in response to this. People don't understand why this man was able to carry a gun on the plane. Some questioned why weren't his bags screened, as if the screeners had missed something. Now, we talked in our roundtable in episode 23 last season about educating Americans about guns, about how little the American people actually know, and about the fear that this ignorance fosters if the news media and politicians, so-called faith leaders, and anti-gun activists just push the right buttons. So let's focus on a few facts today. First off, there's absolutely nothing nefarious about traveling with a firearm. I've done it many times. There are specific rules that you have to follow to do it legally. I wrote about this on my blog, and there are a lot of other places to find this information if you look. As long as you declare that you're traveling with a gun, you store the gun in a hard-sided locked container, and you store any ammunition in a separate box, you're good to go. The gun's locked in your checked baggage. It's in the baggage compartment of the airplane. You cannot access it during the flight. You cannot take a gun onto a plane in carry-on baggage. Thousands of Americans do this every year without incident. It's been perfectly legal since 1968. But it's astonishing how few people actually know this. Consider how many guns and other weapons are confiscated at airports around the country every day. If you've ever followed any of those posts by the TSA, some of that may well be nefarious action, but I'd be willing to bet that a majority of it is just pure ignorance. Finding out how to safely and legally travel with a gun isn't terribly hard to do, but it does require some searching. It does require a little bit of effort, a Google search and some time spent reading the rules, or a blog like mine or many others. Part of what the shooter did is also not uncommon to concealed carriers. Now, when I travel with my firearm, after claiming my luggage, I go to the nearest restroom, still inside the airport, retrieve my gun and holster, load and charge the gun, put the gun on, and then leave the airport. Now, I'm sure thousands of American concealed carriers do the exact same thing every year. But since the American public is clueless and fearful of guns, they're freaked out about this fact. So, traveling with a gun and even taking it to the restroom and loading it when you arrive at your destination, it's not illegal, it's not strange, it's not uncommon. But traveling with a gun without incident, it doesn't make the news, and the public is generally clueless about it until some nutcase, like this guy, does something horrible. The fact that there was an incident, that's what's unusual. So now the question is, how do we respond? Now, we need to recognize that the baggage claim area in an airport is simply not secure. It's not a gun-free zone either, like some people have been reporting on our side. The shooter could just as easily have gotten off the plane, gone to his car in the parking lot, gone back inside the baggage claim area and started shooting. It's not secure. There's nothing to prevent that from happening. The question is, how do we respect the rights of gun owners while preventing this in the future? Obviously, this is an extremely rare act, so changing the law so that the rights of law-abiding citizens are restricted based on something that happens once every 47 years is probably not a good idea. If it turns out to be terrorism, heck, even if it isn't terrorism, groups like ISIS or some other lone wolf has surely seen this with all the media coverage and will take this as an opportunity. There's an opening. There's a possibility for us to cause future mayhem. Because airports, as much as we've spent over the last 20 years to harden them, they're soft targets. We create a secure area that you can't get to without standing in a long line, queuing up in groups and waiting. And as we've seen seen recently in places like Turkey, that's a nice inviting target for evildoers. And quite frankly, I'm surprised it hasn't happened here before. The baggage claim and ticketing areas of airports are completely soft targets. Sheep lining up or bunched together, waiting for the slaughter. So back to our question. What can be done about this specific incident? What can be done to prevent this from happening again without saying, no, we're not going to change anything, it's too rare, and without restricting the rights of law-abiding gun owners who've been traveling like this, like I said, since 1968. Some have said that maybe the baggage claim area should be made part of the secure part of the airport. And I suppose that you could make these areas part of a secure zone and prevent people from entering from outside the airport, but that still doesn't solve the problem. A passenger could still legally do what this person did and access their firearm inside the secure area by retrieving it from his luggage. You could remove all of the restrooms that are in the non-secure side of the airport where baggage claim takes place, but is that really reasonable? I suppose you could do it, but it still wouldn't prevent somebody, if they really wanted to, from just opening their luggage right there in the middle of the baggage claim area. Forbidding travel with guns or ammo, it's not the answer. Millions of Americans travel with firearms for hunting, for competition, for self-defense, and this would restrict their rights to prevent something that happens incredibly rarely. Maybe a passenger should have to pass a background check or to have a valid concealed carry permit or FOID or whatever is required in their state in order to check a firearm at the airport. Maybe that's the answer. That seems reasonable if we're going to do something, and it likely would have prevented this tragedy, although, as we've seen in the Charleston church shooting and other places, the background check system is not infallible. It's likely that this person would have been prevented from checking a firearm if it required a concealed carry permit or a background check. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe we have the TSA affix their own locks to the cases that you bring, and you have to have the TSA remove that lock when you arrive at your destination. Maybe that's the answer. Those ideas are reasonable to discuss, I think. They're worth considering. They would allow law-abiding gun owners to continue to travel with their firearms with some minor changes, minor inconveniences, but it wouldn't infringe on your fundamental right and your ability to travel. But I can guarantee you that nobody's going to even consider those ideas, and nobody's going to suggest it, except maybe me. The problem, as always, is not the gun. It's the evil in the heart of the man who holds the gun. Laws against evil behavior only serve to curb those who obey the law abiding. Criminals, by definition, won't be affected. We have laws against murder already. We've got laws against rape and kidnapping and robbery. We have laws against bribery, against mishandling classified information. We've got laws against running guns to Mexican drug cartels or Chinese gangs. We've got laws against tax evasion. And yet even our elites in the seats of power in our state capitals and in Washington, D.C. routinely break these laws. Laws don't keep us safe. Good people, people of good character, keep us safe. Soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, firemen and policemen, and the law-abiding armed citizen. As I said before, flying with a firearm in checked baggage has been legal since 1968. This is the first incident of this kind since then. Tens of thousands of people travel with firearms of all kinds every year in America without an incident. Freaking out and proposing ill-conceived laws to protect us from evil people is not a solution, but it's the American way of politics. So be on the lookout. Members of Congress have already signaled that they'll be looking at the issue when Congress returns to Washington next week. If you've got any thoughts on this question, how do we prevent another Fort Lauderdale-style attack without completely eliminating your ability to travel with a firearm? Give us a call, 888-571-5552, and leave us a voicemail, or drop by the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback and send us an email or a voice message. We'd like to hear your thoughts, your ideas. And finally, on behalf of everyone here at Armed Lutheran Radio, our thoughts and prayers and condolences go out to the families of the victims, to those who've been injured in this terrible attack. May God comfort you and strengthen you in the days ahead as you recover, as you deal with the loss of a loved one. Christ's blessings to you and our deepest condolences for your loss. We'll be back with more right after this.
You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
As many of you know, Sergeant Bill and I are competitive shooters. We're also reloaders. Bill helped me to get started last year, but I've still got a lot to learn. One thing I do know, though, you need a good source for supplies and components. So let me tell you about U.S. Reloading Supply. Yeah, there are bigger suppliers out there, but what sets U.S. Reloading Supply apart from the rest is their dedication to customer satisfaction. Check them out at usreloadingsupply.com. They carry the top name brands like Starline, Rainier, Barry's, Remington, Spear, and Hornady. If you've got a special order like primers and powder that you don't see on their website, give them a call for a quote. I did and got a great price. Excellent customer service, fast delivery, prices that include shipping, and a promise to match or beat any retailer's price, including shipping. Call them today, 941-451-7357, or visit them today at usreloadingsupply.com and use the promo code Lutheran2017 to save 10% off your order. usreloadingsupply.com.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to implore you to be very careful about what kind of cosmetic modifications you're making to your defensive guns. There was a police officer in Mesa, Arizona who's facing a second-degree murder charge for shooting an unarmed man with his AR-15 during a response to a man with a gun call at a hotel. According to the Tucson News article dated March 16, 2016, an inscription on the inside of the AR on the dust cover used by the officer in the shooting reads, "You're effed," to be censored there. The dust cover inscription is being used against the officer by the prosecution as a way to show that the officer has a cavalier attitude towards the use of deadly force, as it applies to this case. Now, if that sort of thing can happen to a police officer, it can certainly happen to you. So be very careful about the types of cosmetic modifications you're making to your defensive firearms. My advice is to steer clear of Punisher logos or other logos that are similar to that, or cute little sayings like "you're effed," like was on the officer's dust cover in that unfortunate situation. If you must put inscriptions or pictures on your weapon, make sure that they're of the benign variety that can't be construed to indicate that you have some kind of a desire to kill someone. If you want to put your name or your company logo, assuming that your logo isn't some overt, aggressive thing, that's probably okay. But I would be careful about the message that you're sending, intentionally or not, by putting logos or inscriptions on your defensive tools. I've seen some over-the-top reactions to this advice when it was given on the internet by a fellow instructor friend of mine, and it falls into the same ridiculous category of the people who say, "I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6, quote unquote, as if there's such a stark juxtaposition in reality with most decisions. It is in fact possible to neither be judged by 12 nor carried by 6 if you avoid doing things that'll obviously make your character and intentions hard to defend in court. Some people have suggested that they, quote-unquote, shouldn't have to worry about what they're writing on their handguns or their rifles because warriors have traditionally put inscriptions and pictures on their weapons for time immemorial. While that may be the case, what should be and what is are very often two different things in reality. I don't think any rational person would want to be arguing from the position that this officer's in a court of law when their life and possible prison time is on the line. The fewer things you have that can be used against you, from your Facebook post, the T-shirts you wear, the inscriptions on your gun, the better off you're going to be. So be careful about what sorts of things you're inscribing on your defensive tools, because they can and will be used against you if you ever have to stand up for yourself in a court of law. That's your personal defense tip for this week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
AK pattern rifles are known for their rugged reliability in all types of conditions. The best AK pattern rifles come from the desert of Arizona. Lee Armory builds AK pattern rifles using premium imported parts. Lee Armory's enhanced receivers are properly heat treated with CNC drilled trunnion and scope mount holes, Tapco triggers, polished bolt carrier and hammer, receiver rails modeled after the Saiga design to prevent bolt carrier jump, and barrels made from 4150 vanadium steel, nitrided to 1200 degrees to make them harder, more durable, and more accurate. Plus, they offer a limited lifetime warranty. The AK pattern rifle is legendary for its reliability. Lee Armory takes the AK and adds a whole new level of quality and customer service. Available at Copper Custom, Classic Firearms, Ames Surplus, and Elite Ordnance, or visit leearmory.us to see the entire line of Lee premium AK rifles, optics, and accessories. Lee Armory premium AK pattern rifles, born under the Red Star, perfected in Arizona. leearmory.us.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hi, everybody. I am continually encouraging others to take firearms classes to reinforce their skills. And while I teach others and take classes myself, I don't teach concealed carry. However, I do find classes to take. And speaking of concealed carry, today I want to tell you a story about my concealed carry and how I came to it. Initially, my primary purpose for firearms is for hunting. Over the years, my collection has grown, and so has the motivation for my gun ownership. While I enjoy hunting with, plinking with, and collecting firearms, I also have many which are suited for self-defense. And most of my friends own firearms as well, and they own them for self-defense purposes. While this has become one aspect of my own concealed carry motives, it is not the initial reason that I took a concealed carry class. You see, my concealed carry gun is of adequate size and caliber to use for hunting. So it's not most people's ideal gun for concealing. Hunting is the initial purpose, but self-defense became a secondary cause for having the gun. Usually, when I'm pursuing wild animals through the woods, my pistol is securely strapped to my side, and oftentimes it ends up under layers and jackets during cold winter months. This is why I took the concealed carry class, because it becomes concealed while I'm hunting. See, in Colorado, it's okay and it's legal to carry open. But once I throw a jacket on and it becomes concealed, I would be breaking the law. I took the concealed carry class, and these reasons and techniques for caring for self-defense, well, they become parallel. First of all, I'm aware of the gun's location on my body, and I've been rehearsing and quick drop techniques and producing it from beneath layers of clothing while I'm hunting, or beneath my suits when I'm at church, or everyday clothing. Whatever I happen to be wearing, I rehearse with that firearm. While I'm hunting, I'm prepared in the event that a target comes into view and it's moving rapidly. I'm also mentally preparing for an aggressive animal that may threaten my life. The rehearsal with my pistol also includes a possible encounter with an aggressive human. Being a woman alone, or sometimes with my daughter in the woods, makes me a somewhat vulnerable target to would-be attackers. Do I foresee being attacked? No, not really, not by human or an animal, but I always try to be prepared for all scenarios. I would rather have my gun and not need to use it than to have an unexpected event occur and not know what to do. A huge part of carrying is the responsibility that goes along with it. And just as while I'm hunting, I need to know if the bear or lion is of appropriate age or sex before I'm able to take a legal shot, I also need to be absolutely certain that my life is in danger prior to brandishing my firearm in an event of a human attack. Whether I'm in the woods or not, I'm always looking to avoid any confrontation. Today I want to remind you, always be aware of your surroundings. Always remember to trust your instincts and get out of the area before things escalate. So you see, our tactics for concealed carry, although they're different, they do parallel. Go out there, have fun, and always be safe.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
It's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. I'm Alan Gottlieb, founder of the Second Amendment Foundation. When someone says we don't need that kind of gun, remind them the Founding Fathers determined what rights our Constitution should protect. There's a world of difference between rights and needs. It is not the function of government to tell us what we need or what we don't. Certainly no one needs an assault rifle or a Saturday night special, or for that matter, no one needs a Corvette with a high-capacity horsepower engine capable of speeds to 150 miles per hour. But in the hands of honest, responsible individuals, we have the right of choice. We have the right to read books others don't like. We have the right to listen to any radio program we choose. We have the right to dress the way we want to. We also have the right to own firearms of our choice. So the next time someone tells you you don't need something, tell them it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. Join the Second Amendment Foundation today so that this message and our Bill of Rights might live. Call 425-454-7012. That's 425-454-7012.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
This is your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill. Today I thought we'd talk about the shooting off season. So the weather can keep you away from going to the range more often than maybe you were in the summer and the spring. So let's look at some of the stuff we can do to prepare for next season. If you reload, let's stock up on components and ammo. And even if you don't have ammo and components, to put together, maybe it's time to tear that machine down and clean it. Get it ready for the next season and cranking out some bullets. You could also ramp up your dry fire drills, maybe more often, or just work on stuff that you don't have to worry about shooting. Your gun handling skills, your draws, your presenting to the sights, reloads, transitions, one-handed shooting, offhand transfers, shooting with your offhand. Just the things that you can really, really get much, much better at with dry fire. If you want to, you can upgrade your equipment. Maybe you need new sights for your gun, TJ. Or maybe you want a mag well or some new grips, or maybe you just want a new gun. Now's the time to get them and start practicing with them. How about your gear? Maybe you want some new gear, or maybe you just need to do some maintenance on your old gear. Clean up your holster, make sure all the screws and bolts and stuff are all tight, Loctited. They're not going to come loose or fall apart on you. Same thing with your mag pouches. Clean your concealed carry garment, or maybe get a new one. Do some maintenance on your mags, pull them apart, clean them, make sure the springs are in good shape. And your range bag. Maybe it's time to upgrade to a bigger range bag, or maybe a smaller range bag. Maybe you just need to clean that one out. Give it a once over and get it ready for next season. I know in the off season I like to shoot my carry gun and gear more often. That's what I have been doing, and I'm going to continue that because I want to develop that proficiency with my carry setup so that I'm prepared. Oh yeah, and if you get a new gun or a new holster or pouches or anything like that, now it's time to try out that new gear. Get that equipment out and work it. Do dry fire with it. Take it to the matches. Get used to it and any changes that may involve using that new gear. After the first of the year, you can maybe research some classes or some training classes that you can sign up for and take in the spring or the early summer to kind of jumpstart your season. But mostly with less time actually on the range, it would be a good idea to take some time to reflect on the issues you had last year, fix those issues, and make them strengths. For example, if you're fumbling reloads, practice them in dry fire so that you've got them down, they're subconscious, you don't even think about them, and they'll be even more consistent and faster than they were last year. If you hit a lot of non-threats, work on shot calling and accuracy. You can work on your trigger press in dry fire so that you're going to be more accurate. Work on your grip so that you have better recoil control, so maybe that second shot or third shot follows up and doesn't hit that non-threat because you have a better grip, better recoil management. But most of all, when you get out to shoot, whether it's just at a range or going out to shoot a club match or just to go shoot with friends, have fun. Don't worry about your scores as much. Just practice, shoot, have fun, and enjoy yourself. Or maybe you could just take some time off, put the gun and gear away, just get away from it for a little bit. Get a little break so that when you come back to your dry fire practice and shooting matches, it'll be fresh, it'll be fun, and you'll be more enthusiastic. And that's what shooting competition is all about. Having fun, trying to push yourself to do better and better. I'm Sergeant Bill, and this has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
So you have your concealed carry permit or license to carry. Now what? Now you need a good holster. Not one of those cheap neoprene prophylactic holsters you can buy in the big box stores. You need a holster custom built for the firearm you intend to carry every day. Check out cooksholsters.com. Made in the USA, Cooks Holsters are available in a wide range of colors and designs for inside the waistband or outside waistband carry. They carry a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and take 15% off everything in the store. You put in the time and effort to legally carry a firearm for personal protection. Protect your firearm with a custom holster from cooksholsters.com.
Up next, we're clinging to God and guns with Pastor John Bennett.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another segment of Clinging to God and Guns with our good friend Pastor John Bennett. Pastor, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
It looks like we've got an interesting article here from a website called Dating God, which sounds like the name of some hipster praise band, but this is Franciscan Spirituality for the 21st Century is the subtitle of the blog. This is by Daniel Horan, OFM. He's a Franciscan friar of Holy Name Province, a visiting assistant professor of systematic theology at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. He's a columnist for America Magazine and the author of several books, and I think the last I looked, well over 100 published articles. He studied theology and journalism at St. Bonaventure University before he entered the Order of Friars Minor, if you wondered what the OFM stood for. And he's authored a piece here. This is from February of 2011. So this was after Gabby Giffords, prior to Newtown. And it's called Christians and Guns, Where Do You Stand? He basically is responding to another article about another friar who admits that he carries a gun for his own protection. And this has him probably visibly upset. You can almost see the guy shaking in his cassock. This is a theme I've addressed elsewhere in another blog post. It's a topic I have returned to because of a Catholic News Service article that was published today bearing the title, In Gun Control Debate, Catholic Position Elusive. The subheading of the story reads, One gun-carrying priest, I tell people all life is sacred, including mine. That should give you a sense of why this is a matter worth discussing again. The February 11th CNS article begins, Avid outdoorsman and hunter Friar Joe Klassen, associate pastor at Holy Spirit Parish in Maryland Heights, Missouri, has a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Quoting Friar Klassen, I rarely ever conceal and carry, but sometimes if I'm in a very bad area, I do take protection, he said. I tell people all life is sacred, including mine. A few states away, Friar Theodore Parker said he knows he has the constitutional right to own a gun, but can't see any reason why he would. The pastor of 2 inner-city Detroit parishes says, the real purpose of a gun in our culture is violence, and there's just too much of that, he contends. As readers of this blog know, I agree with the position of the second interviewed priest, Friar Parker, and take it a step further. A step that, according to a January 14th CNS article titled Gun Control, Church Firmly Quietly Opposes Firearms for Civilians, is clearly in line with the Church's teaching, no matter how elusive, quote-unquote, it may appear to Friar Klassen and others.
This is dripping with condescension, my goodness.
Yeah, he's bad for this. You'll find this throughout the whole article. His use of words and his subtle condescension is just, it's runs throughout the whole thing.
I didn't know that arrogance was one of the tenets of the Franciscan order.
Poverty, arrogance, condescension.
You know, he talks about how this article is in line with the church's teaching. It's in line with the opinion of the liberal bishops and cardinals within the Catholic Church.
Right. Doesn't teaching have some sort of a meaning within the church? Isn't that like doctrine?
It has to be doctrine, or to use the Catholic term dogma. There's nothing within Scripture that could give you a clear directive to full disarmament, which is the position of that article. I did just a little looking, because that was all the way back in 1975. They were saying we want to disarm all civilians. Mm-hmm. And it quoted the number of gun deaths and so forth. Of course, it uses the inflated number that includes suicide and gang violence and that sort of thing.
Right.
He's trying to quote, the position that has been put forward not in church dogma and official decrees from the Pope or anything like that. He's going off of various publications that have been put forward by the bishops and the cardinals within the United States that oppose firearm ownership.
Guns are designed. Here's the first of the doozy paragraphs. Guns are designed to do one thing: kill. Granted, there are instances such as hunting, at which times civilians might justifiably use a firearm to gather food. However, here comes some more condescension, there are other ways one can find nourishment today, and some people would even suggest that one need not hunt to eat healthily. Just ask a vegetarian or a vegan. Apart from hunting animals for food, the only thing guns are good for are killing human beings. Putting the best construction on this one, this is mind-numbingly stupid. There's no need to hunt because you can be a vegan. It's just... Hey, Pastor, does God say in Genesis 1, hey, you can have dominion over all the animals, but don't eat them because you don't need to kill them because you can eat plants?
No, after the flood, he said, hey, Noah, go for it, except for these certain unclean animals, go for it. Gosh, Noah must have loved that first piece of steak he bit into. But then you even get in the book of Acts where God has this vision for St. Peter and says, hey, all these other things, you can eat those too. Thank the Lord, because I love pork.
Well, as long as you don't use a gun to harvest it. Yeah.
But here's, this is just, again, dripping with arrogance. I have a very good friend of mine who, one of my closest friends in the world, he lived in Alaska for a brief while, moved up there specifically for the hunting rights. Mm-hmm. And especially for the Eskimo people, they literally harvest moose. Mm-hmm. They actually use the term harvest, where there'll be a massive herd, and as the herd is crossing a river, you'll have a group of people in a canoe that they go alongside, and they use a .22 to pop the moose right behind the ear and kill it, take it to shore where the women and children are butchering them on site, and they'll go through 20-30 moose in a day. Mm-hmm. And that is their community's protein source for an entire year. They're very poor communities, and to say that you can get your food somewhere else, for these people, there is nowhere else but what God has provided through creation. He really has a narrow view of reality for how it is in the rest of the world, which is kind of, sad to say, because, hey, you're a Franciscan, you're supposed to be focused on helping the poor, yet you have no idea how the poor even live.
Right, and take the example that Mia gave us when I first interviewed her. She was talking. I asked her how she got her start hunting, and she was talking about how she was a single mom and she figured that she could for just the cost of the hunting license and some time in the field, she could put food on the table. So
yeah,
I guess Mia should have been thinking about a garden instead.
She should have gone vegan.
Friar Klassen defends his ownership, concealment, and carrying of a firearm in quote-unquote very bad areas for quote-unquote protection. In what way does he intend to use the firearm for protection? The most obvious answer is to kill or harm another human being before that person could ostensibly attempt to harm him. How is that okay, especially for a priest? Notice the first thing that jumped out at me on this paragraph, and then I'll let you go, is how he uses these words again. He ascribes terms like kill and harm and violence to law-abiding gun owners who just want to protect themselves, quote unquote, and then he doesn't mention the violence or harm that the gun owner is trying to protect against, and he then refers to the criminal simply as, quote unquote, another human being. It's just...
Well, another human being as a criminal, gosh, there's some really terrible criminals out there that really push the envelope on that one. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at this critically from the perspective that he is a Franciscan monk, and much of their philosophy is based on asceticism, helping the poor, generosity to others, and so forth. We could just put that under the umbrella of loving your neighbor in the biblical understanding of it. Mm-hmm. Loving your neighbor includes coming to his defense, which I would assume Father Klassen, that he is prepared to do that in the event that the life of others around him is harmed, is threatened. To say that, in what way does he intend to use the firearm for protection? Statistically, a vast majority of the cases where a firearm is used in self-defense, the trigger is never pulled. Mm-hmm. That simply the threat of the possibility of a bad guy being met with lethal force is enough to get them to cease and desist.
Yep.
So again, statistically, just saying I have a gun without even pulling it out of your holster is oftentimes all that's needed to make a bad guy run in the opposite direction. He wrote this article while Father Klassen was in St. Louis, which is, if you've ever been to St. Louis, mm-hmm. There's some really horrible, horrible bad places out there. And if you're a priest and you're going out there to help the poor, that you know what, you're not going to be able to help them if you're going into an area where your life is going to be taken if you're not prepared to protect yourself.
Right, and the poor can't always come to you. You've got to go out and take... you've got to go where they are. So
exactly.
That means,
exactly.
And this parish, Holy Spirit Parish, where Friar Klassen was serving at the time, is in Maryland Heights, Missouri, which just happens to be, like you said, it's a suburb of St. Louis, which also happens to be right down the street from Ferguson. It's next door to Ferguson. An idea
of where he's at.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm going to take a big issue with him, is that he's picking and choosing this, his fellow priest's words that showed up in an article. Here's one of the Catholic News Service briefs that was released exactly 2 days before he wrote this blog article. Mm-hmm. Animals help us sustain life, says Missouri priest to his avid hunter. In Alaska's Yukon Delta, Father Joe Klassen and a friend worked for hours lugging meat from a moose he shot out of a swamp and into a holding place. After the bush pilot returned them to the launching point, Father Klassen donated hundreds of pounds of meat to the locals. The remaining 250 pounds was shipped back to the parish he served at the time for a special dinner, with all proceeds going to a pro-life center. An elk he bagged with a bow and arrow in northern Idaho in 2007 ended up as the focal point for an elk burger dinner, also helping a pro-life center. I always like to focus on the cycle of life, says the 37-year-old pastor of Holy Spirit Parish in Maryland Heights, Missouri. The animals help us sustain life, and the funds we raise support the lives of those unborn and their mothers. Father Klassen learned to love fishing and then hunting at an early age from his father. He used his skills of hunting to feed the poor.
And to raise money for pro-life causes.
Right. How much has Mr. Horan, Friar Horan, done to feed the poor? Well, it appears that he spends all of his time either blogging or serving as a visiting assistant professor at Catholic Theological Union.
Or hawking his books on Amazon.
Right. So, he's sitting here criticizing this priest, only taking snippets of what he said out of context that were written in an article. And here's a news brief from 2 days before he writes his article showing what this priest is actually doing.
Let's see. He continues, and here's another one. All life is sacred, period. And to be truly pro-life means that one's life is not worth more than another, not even a priest's, over an alleged criminal's.
Alleged.
Yes. He does this, but he does this on purpose, though. He's creating the impression that gun owners are acting as judge, jury, and executioner. They're denying the criminal their day in court because he's an alleged criminal. He allegedly did this bad thing. So to avoid the potential of harming or killing another human, the good friar seems to think that we should not carry a gun. We should set a good example by being helpless when a quote-unquote another human being decides to allegedly attack us.
Yeah, I guess it's alleged until either they've killed you and gone to court and been tried and convicted, or until you manage to stop them without taking their life, and only then after they've been tried and convicted are they then a criminal, no longer alleged.
He mentions earlier that his opinion is clearly in line with the church's teaching. Well, I decided to look into that, and what church is the good friar talking about? He's talking about, the Franciscan order is an order of the Roman Catholic Church, right?
Right.
So according to Part 3, Section 2, Chapter 2, Article 5, Subsection 1 of the Catechism of the Roman Catholic Church, we find a section entitled Legitimate Defense.
Really?
Yes. And
how inconvenient for the good friar.
Well, I assume Franciscans go through confirmation, right? Maybe Friar Haran was out sick that day. But under this section, legitimate defense, it says this: the legitimate defense of persons and societies is not an exception to the prohibition against murder of the innocent that constitutes intentional killing. Now, this Article 5 is talking about the Fifth Commandment. The act of self-defense can have a double effect: the preservation of one's own life and the killing of the aggressor. The one is intended, the other is not. Love towards oneself remains a fundamental principle of morality. Therefore, it is legitimate to insist on respect for one's own right to life. Someone who defends his life is not guilty of murder, even if he is forced to deal his aggressor a lethal blow. Unquote.
Wow. Well, good on the Catholic Church. And I hate to break it to the good friar, but he said in a very condescending way that he quotes the article as clearly in line with the church's teaching, no matter how elusive, quote unquote, it may appear to Father, class, and others. So evidently the church's teaching is elusive to the good friar.
Yes, apparently.
Father Klassen has it right on.
And
it's interesting, though, that he also says all life is sacred. And I did a little looking on his blog, and he's actually critical of pro-life organizations.
Of course.
Interestingly enough, he's criticized these organizations that have their marches for protecting the rights and the lives of the unborn. He is also, he says, there's things far worse than abortion. He says that a person doesn't have to walk past abortion, but they have to walk past homelessness and poverty, et cetera, et cetera. He says that, things like hunger, disease, AIDS, genocide, natural disasters, and wars, those kinds of things are, equally important, if not more important, than abortion. He criticizes the March for Life. He downplays the horrific nature of abortion. And then he praises Obama and says, I hope he gets reelected. Back in 2012, evidently from everything that he's written, the only life that he considers to be truly sacred is life outside the womb. So again, it appears that the church's teaching is elusive to him,
right,
to use his words.
Yes.
And I'm not using air quotes that time.
I understand that the issue of self-defense is a complicated and contentious one, where people otherwise committed to nonviolence find examples worthy of exemption. However, when we really turn to the gospel for guidance in the matter of violence and the role of Christians, can we ever justify the use of violence? Stop right there.
Well,
Again, it's like we can't get two sentences without... Can we justify violence in the role of Christians? And this is another one of his wordplay things where he's trying to confuse us with loaded questions. What's he getting at here with this in the role of Christian thing?
It seems to be that, and again, this shouldn't be a surprise, that he has this conflicting problem with his political views versus his religious views, and he's superimposing his political views upon his religion. He's using this liberal tactic of referring to any time a firearm is used as violence. Granted, it meets, if you're just looking at the base definition of violence, you could say that's true. But he's demonizing anyone who possesses a firearm as being a person who is willing to commit violence. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So here he's using the term violence to refer to even the act of self-defense, thereby demonizing self-defense itself.
Right. And Friar Klassen, whom he's criticizing, isn't foreseeing being attacked because he's a Christian. It's not violence in his role as a Christian. He's not talking.
Right.
He's not talking about, when he talks about bad areas, he's not talking about taking a stroll through first century Rome. He lives right next to Ferguson, Missouri.
Right. We look at the contrast between what is self-defense and what is persecution and martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
Within the New Testament, it does speak of against violence within the context of loving our neighbor.
Right.
That's very clear. We can't avoid that. It doesn't address the issue of self-defense so much because that wasn't part of the context in which the gospel was being proclaimed. Jesus addresses more the issue of martyrdom and persecution.
Right.
That if these things are happening to you, and within the context of being committed upon the Christian by the state, whether it's Rome, whether it's the Sanhedrin, whether it's our own government, city, state, federal government that's committing a persecution, Jesus is saying that you should submit to that. Mm-hmm. Because by doing that, you are bearing witness to him.
Right.
Self-defense is completely divorced by that. That is one individual protecting their life against another individual who is not coming upon them as an agent of the state.
Right. Jesus Christ, and here we go. Jesus Christ himself submitted, innocent as he was, to the violence of the state and individuals. In the case of self-defense, Jesus chastised his own apostles for trying to defend him with violence. Jesus did not, in capital letters, see self-defense as a legitimate reason for violence. How many times are we going to see this?
Yeah, it's like Luke 22 doesn't even appear in his Bible. It's trying to take the events of what happened, leading up to our Lord's arrest and trial. It's also interesting that he says that he submitted to the violence of the state and individuals. That would be incorrect. When we look at the definition of self-defense versus persecution and martyrdom, mm-hmm. it was violence perpetrated by the state, mm-hmm. Because the Sanhedrin, that was more or less the ruling agent over the Jewish people. the way it worked in first century Israel is that you had the king, who was more or less a lackey of the Roman government. You did have the Roman government that was ultimately in authority over the region, but the Roman government allowed the Jewish people to govern themselves in regards to their own laws.
Right.
So when Jesus was arrested, when he was beaten and all of that stuff, his entire passion, that was perpetrated by the state, i.e. the Sanhedrin.
And for those who missed the previous dozen times that we've found these passages misused, could you explain briefly the problem with what Friar Haran has done here with Matthew 26?
Again, what he's doing, as we've seen many, many times, is that he is taking Christ's response to Peter to put his sword away, and saying that Christ was condemning any act of self-defense. But he was doing this for the purpose of telling Peter, I'm going to the cross for you. You're not going to prevent that from happening.
Right.
This had to happen for him to save humanity from their sins. That was the reason that he tells Peter to put his sword away, not because it was he was condemning self-defense.
Right.
So Jesus did not see defense of him going to the cross and preventing that from happening as a legitimate reason for violence.
There you go.
So to correct his words, what he did see as a legitimate use of violence is everything that was going to be done to him that he willingly submitted to.
Right. And to be fair, the Catechism of the Roman Catholic Church does refer to Matthew 26 and the whole turn the other cheek passage when discussing the fifth commandment. So while this is epic dumbassery, it's institutional dumbassery, I guess. I find it particularly upsetting when priests publicly defend the carrying of weapons. It seems like something that stands in stark contrast to what Christian life is all about. When it comes to guns of any sort, we know what Jesus would do. I mean,
he'd say, sell your tunic
and go buy two.
Sell your jacket and go buy at least two.
That's right. The world will only be transformed by love, not violence. Maybe instead of carrying a tool of death into, quote unquote, here we go with the condescension again, very bad areas, unquote, Friar Klassen could carry a spirit of openness and peace, meeting the people he is scared of with the compassion of Christ and not the violence the Lord condemns. This ticks me off, especially considering what we know Friar Klassen does every couple of years with his Alaska hunting trips.
So is he saying that this Father Klassen does not carry a spirit of openness and peace?
That's what he's...
That he doesn't meet people with the compassion of Christ? That he is only approaching these people with violence? I mean, yes, I'm a man of the cloth, pardon my language, but what kind of a-hole must you be when you're going to assume the worst out of your fellow priest because he chooses to responsibly be prepared to defend his own life?
This is especially important if gun-carrying priests like to see themselves as in persona Christi, which in Latin is in the person of Christ. Well, first, Jesus didn't condemn self-defense, right? He commanded his disciples to carry weapons. We've already discussed that. He said he came to bring division, not peace. He used a weapon to drive the money changers from the temple, and you can put an eye out with a whip.
I hate to break it to him, but Father Klassen is really the one here who's going about in persona Christi, if he wants to try and use that terminology, because Father Klassen is going into the worst of the worst neighborhoods. He's bringing the gospel with him. He's showing compassion through providing food for people that are destitute. And all this guy can do is criticize him.
Mm-hmm.
How dare he own a gun? How dare he go into the worst of the worst areas with a concealed firearm, because heaven forbid somebody take his life and he can no longer be there doing acts of mercy on behalf of the poor and destitute.
What you've got is an ivory tower liberal in a cassock criticizing a guy who actually gets out in the streets of St. Louis, Missouri, in bad parts of town to bring the gospel to the poor and downtrodden, who goes out in the field and hunts and harvests meat for the poor and the hungry. This is just the height of arrogance. It just drives me nuts.
The worst part of it is that he's hiding behind the cloth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm saying these things as an ordained priest of a Franciscan order. Listen to me. He's in a position where he has the potential to influence a large number of people, and he's using his ability and his position to demonize his fellow priests, to demonize other Christians, to twist the words of Christ. I really don't like this guy. I really don't.
And he closes with this sentence that just tops it all off. Jesus wouldn't defend guns. Why would you? Well, he didn't condemn them either, did he?
No.
He condemns
Jesus wouldn't defend guns.
He condemned murder. He condemned, but you can commit murder with your hands, your feet, with rocks like Cain did to Abel.
Right.
Jesus wouldn't defend rocks. Why would you? Right. Any last thoughts on this guy? Other than I hope we don't have to read another one of his blog posts.
Well, we probably will, because he provides a target-rich environment. If anyone is considering ever going into the ministry, regardless of your church affiliation, Catholic, Lutheran, Baptist, whatever, please, please, please don't use your official position to become a social justice warrior, to advocate politically. Even if you're, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm assuming that 99.9% of your audience are probably conservative-minded.
I would assume
Don't even use your position for that, to promote conservative political ideology. Use your position to promote the gospel, which is what this guy should be doing. But instead, he is fostering hate and distrust towards his fellow priests and towards responsible gun owners.
Thank you again, Pastor, for joining us. It was a pleasure.
An odd pleasure, but a pleasure nonetheless.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org.
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode. Thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing. If you like what you hear here on the show, if you've got a question, visit the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback and let us know. Stop by iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn Radio, wherever you listen to us, and leave us a review. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear your comments. Thank you to my contributors, Aaron Israel, Sergeant Bill Silvia, Mia Anstine, and Pastor John Bennett. Be sure to join us again next week. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.